Okay, we are back to talk about Disclaimer, episode 5. And again, this is the first episode aired as a single episode, whereas the first four were paired together. This show, written and directed by Alfonso Cuarón, taken from a 2015 Renee Knight novel of the same name. As we get into episode 5, as she's no longer welcome at home, Catherine goes to stay at her mother's house and admits the whole story of Jonathan to her mother. She confesses it all while they sleep in the same bed. Stephen delivers copies of the book A Perfect Stranger to her office and tells her staff that Catherine has been harassing him. Catherine's staff confronts her. She lashes out and strikes one of her colleagues before storming out of the office. Robert meets Stephen for dinner and communicates that he feels that his wife's actions were both pitiful and unforgivable, but he himself asks for forgiveness from Stephen for any role that he or Nicholas played in the whole story. Stephen placates him, but really just wants to put Robert in conflict with Catherine. Meanwhile, Nicholas, Robert and Catherine's son, begins spiraling with his drug use and makes a social media connection with a fake Jonathan account that Stephen has set up. Stephen reels in Nicholas. The two of them begin chatting through direct messages. Stephen eventually reveals who Jonathan is and that Nicholas's mother was the cause of his death in Italy. Stephen sends Nicholas the intimate photos of his mother, calls her a whore, tells Nicholas she never loved him. This sends Nicholas even further into a spiral, deeper into drugs. He passes out as the episode ends. Um, wow, a lot of or seemingly interesting drama here, but I get the sense that we didn't do too much in this episode. I don't know. Do you feel the same way about this episode 5?
Yeah, and I think maybe the first way I want to approach it is in terms of thinking about the structure of the narrative, right? In previous episodes, we have gone back and forth between the present and the past and the story of what happened in Italy, which, as we discussed last week, we think is the book version of events, but whatever. You've got multiple timelines, and I think that they flowed in a way that was really interesting. And um, there was the question of, okay, what exactly did happen, and so on. And while we talked about whether what we saw in episodes 3 and 4 is what really truly happened, or if it's the fictional version of what happened, there's no movement on that kind of question in this episode. And it makes me wonder how much there will be in the remaining two episodes.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to bring up the one little thing that I thought would this help us tie that bow together, which was we see Nicholas reading quotes from the book. I mean, literal Jonathan says this, Catherine said this. Um, Again, there is no way Nancy, Stephen, Nicholas, Robert, any of these people know this. And so if Nicholas is reading things that directly tie to conversations had in the timeline where we see these events take place, then we have to assume that we're seeing the events as described in the book, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I feel fairly confident about that, although it did occur to me over the past week at one point to kind of chuckle at Nancy imagining her son doing butt stuff. Like, if we're imagining that she's making this up, right? It's not what actually happened. It's what she is making up. That she's like, well, let's put some butt stuff in there.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
But
gosh.
whatever. I just thought it was kind of a funny thought that occurred to me. And maybe it does get to something broader. Something just feels a little off
Yeah.
in terms of what I think the show wants to do, um, and the tone of what we're actually getting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it really we've touched on this before, but boy, this feels like to me through 5 episodes that we could have made this a long movie. And I think that there is so much happening that's meant to be um, beautiful and artistic and emotional that does not lend itself to what are we trying to figure out? What are we trying to learn? What do we still have yet to do? Because we now have less than 2 hours of this show left. I think I glanced the next episode is like 42 minutes long. we, there is still so much we do not know, especially now giving us an episode without any flashback, without any resolution to we see more of what happened, or we learn that the reality of what happened. There's so much that's trying to do, and yet it's like almost like this episode to me couldn't help but keep stepping on its toes of trying to be something that it doesn't want to be.
Yeah, I mean, it largely is centered around what Stephen is doing in carrying out his vengeance plan, right? He's gotten this guy to help him make an Instagram account where he's pretending to be Jonathan. Nicholas rather pathetically just starts
Yeah.
talking to him, and I mean, I guess that's plausible. I guess it's like Nicholas is lonely. Does he have friends? We haven't really seen friends, so maybe he doesn't have friends, really. And he told his dad he has a girlfriend. Where's she at? We haven't seen her.
Nope.
Did he make that up? I don't know. Um, and but okay, and but then you're getting Steven's perspective, what he's doing there, which he realizes is very mean with regard to Nicholas, who doesn't really deserve it. But who cares because Catherine really, really deserves it, right? And he also goes to her workplace, and um, those scenes didn't really work for me. Um,
Yeah, that was tough. That just what maybe are seemingly minor things. Everything from her assistant like touching Stephen on the knees and talking to him in a certain way, like he's an incapable old man, to saying as she walked out that she's going to be canceled, to everyone just sort of, almost like holding up the books, like they're holding up the pitchforks, coming after her. I don't know. It just was tough scene for that I just didn't quite get.
it was of every, I mean, so by and large, through 5 hours, let's say ish, through 5 episodes, I've thought, if nothing else, this series is very well done. It's very well directed. It's very well acted. Like, except that scene, right? Because I just thought like all of her coworkers just seemed almost like caricatures
Yeah.
of something.
Yeah.
Um, and having her yell, "You're so canceled" or whatever. It was just like, I don't believe that these are real people behaving this way, really. But it's going to function in terms of how that's creating scandal around her and so on. Okay, and this is interesting, and what happens to her, I'm curious about, and that is part of the story. I do wonder if it is the main part of the story as we proceed to the end, right? Like, what, um, how does Stephen's revenge plan carry out and carry forward, and so on. The big thing that I guess is causing a problem for me relates to the worry that we mentioned very early on about whether what she did in Italy 20 years ago
Yeah.
was a terrible, awful, heinous thing that makes her deserve severe punishment.
Yeah. I mean, I will say my question now is, why is Stephen not worse than Catherine at this point? What he's doing. And you may say eye for an eye, retribution. I wouldn't have had to do this if not for you. But unless we really see some reality of some things that Catherine is doing, again, she has done some abhorrent, immoral things. But man, I mean, Stephen is in all the aspects of Catherine's life just trying to destroy her.
Yeah. And see, here's how I'm thinking about it because I'm worried about what the show can even do at this point to make this better. I think that, okay, so we basically agreed that the version of events that we saw in Italy is the version that's in the book.
Yes.
That's what we're thinking, right? Everyone in this show who reads the book says, "Oh my God, she's so terrible." Just an awful, awful, awful woman, right?
Hmm.
The show, I think personally, did not make me feel that.
100% agree.
And it needed to, right? Like if it's showing us the version of events in the book, almost in particular, if that's the version in the book, then that version that we saw should have made us feel like she's awful.
Yeah,
And I just don't know that it did.
it seems to me like the reactions where people have said how awful she is, she got what she deserved, just cannot believe who this woman is, almost seems like active sins, active things that she has done, as opposed to I fell asleep accidentally on the beach, or I got caught up in some emotion and a guy and I went to bed together. I mean, and I don't know. I'm not seeing. I think we're on the same page. I'm not seeing it yet. Sort of where's the she
Hmm.
got what she deserved. If what she deserved is that she is going to die for these sins, then what is left uncovered at this point?
Yeah, and I just don't know. And look, to be clear to people listening, I'm not going so far as to defend her.
Right.
Like surely she acted badly, maybe I'm supposed to feel a little bit more along the lines of neglect for the child Nicholas, leaving him on the beach to go hook up in the
Yeah.
bathroom. And I mean, like that's there, but I feel like what the show wants to do is to hit that note where we're agreed that what she did was something heinous,
Mhm.
but then also kind of make our feelings ambiguous, or maybe that's not quite the right word, but the point is, it is often putting us in her perspective in the
Yeah.
present to kind of make us a step more sympathetic to her, right? So I feel like the intention is to make us feel a bit torn about that.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that they've pulled it off very well, unfortunately.
And I can see from one angle, I think we have some reference points of this where Robert has said, especially now that he has learned what happened in Italy, because of that, you started this career, you did all of these things, you were never here, you were a bad mother, you neglected your child, you left, you were always gone, you were always traveling for these work projects. Okay, that's also a bad thing to do, but that's not something that if you take the perspective of Nancy and Stephen that they could have been aware of. That's all post what happened with Jonathan. So you can't even calculate that into what we're talking about here.
Right, yeah. And I mean, from Steven's perspective, Robert is a minor character in the story. He tells us this in the voiceover and so on. It's not
Hmm.
really about him. He's meeting
Yeah.
him for dinner. I don't know what he's going to try to do, carrying that forward to hurt Catherine, but that's what he cares about. But as a viewer of the show, yeah, I mean, I clearly see how Robert has been wronged. Um, and I see how Nicholas has been, or, in the story in Italy, wronged in terms of neglected and so on. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like what feels the thinnest is with Jonathan, particularly if we start thinking, okay, well, we've seen the version in the book.
Yeah.
If we accept that, we say, okay, well, what did Nancy know in order to write the book? All she
Hmm.
knows is that her kid drowned in the ocean, saving Nicholas's life, and that then also Jonathan and Catherine had an affair that she discovers through the photographs. I think
Yeah.
that's all the information she has to work with, and everything else is the story she's built up around it.
I find myself thinking, is there more to the Steve and Nancy Jonathan story that we don't know that motivated or incentivized Nancy to come up with this story that can be plausibly put together based on photographs she's seen and the timeline of things that happened and an accident that they have been told that took place on the beach. But is there more that we have yet to see between that family of Stephen, Nancy, and Jonathan that in her grief, she needs to come up with this story to sort of cover up something that they have done in their life or something that happened in their family situation. I don't know how that could be done. I mean, he was in Italy, they weren't. We know generally the story that happened on the beach, they weren't there, but
Yeah.
it just feels like there's some pieces of this puzzle missing.
Hmm. I don't know. I don't know if there'll be more on that front. That could be interesting. I mean, maybe we should note, though, even with what I was just saying, apparently Catherine reads the book and thinks, that's me. This is true. This is what happened, at least to a sufficient degree, right? That Nancy's actually more or less getting it right. But
Hmm.
I have to imagine that she is in her grief and anger spinning it in the most negative way possible against Catherine.
Yes, yes.
Um, Whereas, you know, almost particularly at this point, now that Stephen has um, told Nicholas, now that Nicholas
Yeah,
knows, now that Catherine can no longer protect Nicholas from this story,
right, right.
um, why wouldn't she own up to the verifiable facts of the events and spin her own story to defend herself?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess there's something to be said that Nicholas wants absolutely nothing to do with her,
Yeah,
never wants to talk to her. But I just find myself, certainly because of what he goes through in this episode, what it leads him to do. It's like Nicholas is a victim in this story multiple times over. Like,
yeah,
why, Stephen, are you resorting to this level to just drive a wedge between Nicholas and his mom that's really already there? I mean, maybe he's not aware that it's there, but it's like you are. Does he know how much of an addict Nicholas is? I don't know, but I mean, you're putting someone else's life in danger.
yeah. I mean, he probably doesn't know. I don't know how he would know about the
Yeah,
heroin use and things like that. Uh, um, I don't know how much I care about Nicholas. I
yeah.
put this in the. I don't mean to sound harsh, but a lot of this episode was centered on him, and I don't know that the series has really done enough work to make me feel terribly invested in him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so that's also something of an issue.
Yeah,
I
when
mean,
there's
of
no
course,
when
bad.
there's yeah, when there's no emotional resonance or connection to a character, I mean, he barely speaks. He wants nothing to do with his mother. We have no backstory for him other than he was rescued in the ocean when he was 5 years old. There's just I find myself not caring much about. I care about what's happened to him. I don't care about him much as a character.
Yeah, and he doesn't remember.
Right. Nothing.
That seems a little bit weird to me. Like I know that it's very common to not remember things that happened when you were a little kid,
Yeah.
except like big traumatic things. Like you have a way of sticking in there. I would think generally, at least in terms of my experience. So
Yeah.
it seems a little bit weird to me that he doesn't remember, um, or I mean, I guess has just been maybe it's repressed in like a
Yeah.
psychoanalytic kind of sense
Yeah.
because it was so traumatic.
Or he's been done
Um,
drugs for so long that he just has no recollection of that. Yep.
I don't know, or that's coming back. This is the return of the repressed that's leading to his
Yep.
meltdown and so on. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I don't mean to say I don't care, but yeah, I just don't feel terribly invested in that character. Although, as you say, he's clearly a victim here multiple times over.
Yeah.
And again, to go back to something you said earlier, yeah, by the end of this episode, I was very much thinking Stephen is the worst person in this story.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, within the absence of other things that Catherine has done to go to the level of driving people to what Stephen is doing, again, Catherine is not a good person, but Stephen has surpassed her. I mean, in terms of the information that we have right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to wreck her family.
Yeah.
He's wrecked her marriage, wreck her relationship with her son irreparably, wreck her career, and then I think potentially go further than that. If in the book she ends up dying in a way that people think is just, I have to imagine that Stephen is trying to make that part of the story real.
Yeah. 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 It gives that sort of confirmation bias that what I'm working towards is right because people have seen this and have justified that she deserved all of this. And yeah, so where is he headed with all of this? It's almost like, okay, if your goal is just to destroy this person's life and every aspect of it. Well, you succeeded in that, but apparently there's still more to go. If
Yeah.
we do in fact believe that she's going to get what she deserves by dying, it's like I don't know how Catherine can catch up in the immorality race between the two of them at this point.
I don't know. I am very curious to see what happens in the final two episodes, and we'll continue. We'll push through.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone can tell we're a little bit on. I did need a little souring on the show a little bit here with episode five, but it's also on that front that I kind of met Ryan that in terms of spinning her own version of events publicly, because at this point it's going to come to that. It's becoming a public scandal. They're releasing the video of her in the office, right? It threatens to wreck her career, her professional life, her ability to make money moving into the future, right?
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
almost feels like she's going to have to come out and say, look, and they're like, okay, let me try a version of this, and cutting to the problem of how bad is what she did.
Mhm.
So, like, if you spin it um, as best you can in her favor, she could say, okay, 20 years ago, I was in Italy. I met this young man. We ended up having an affair. Of course, I shouldn't have done that. I know that that was bad. But he heroically saved my son, who had gone out to sea and tragically died. And um, I just felt that this was something I couldn't tell my husband or let the world know about. And then along comes this guy who sends me a book about what I did, and
Hmm.
receiving that book is a threat, you know. And my son doesn't know about this, and I'm trying to protect my son.
Yeah.
So, just kind of explaining why she's behaved the way she has. I don't know, man. I still just don't. I don't look at her and that story and think like, well,
Yeah.
she deserves to suffer or whatever, you know.
Yeah. And to your point, I just can't get on my head that it seems like over the last two episodes, there's some kind of big reveal coming. There's something coming that's going to either turn this story on its head. I just don't think it's a linear path that we're on right now. Just Steven's going to continue to do terrible things so that Catherine is driven to suicide. I mean, just as an example, it just doesn't seem like that's the
Yeah.
path we're headed here. So, and I don't know, maybe it's just, again, thinking about Cuarón, his past movies, what you typically see, if you're watching Shawshank or Ocean's 11, right after 2 hours, you're going to get the big reveal and there's a twist and then everything pays off. It just seems like we are 6 hours into this. It's like, something's coming
Hmm.
and we just really need to see what that payoff is, I think.
Yeah, I still think there's a possibility that it's in line with the theory that I put forward last week that we were talking about, that we saw the version in Italy that is the book version,
Yep.
and that the
Yep.
twist will be in terms of seeing the reality. And maybe Jonathan is, you
Yep.
know, maybe Jonathan put that kid out to sea. That was the theory for people who didn't listen last week.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I
Yep.
do expect there has to be something, some return to what actually happened in the past
Yes.
versus the version in
Have
the
to.
book.
Have to be. Yeah. Have to be.
Um, I forgot that Catherine had a mother, but I remember last week, where's she going to go? And she goes to her mom's house. That makes sense. Um, and then, of course, her mom has dementia, basically.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in the summary that she confesses everything to her mother, but we should note, right? Her mother was asleep and also is
Yeah.
not really mentally with it in certain ways. So I don't know whether it's an open question whether her mother knows, even though she told her, right? And I don't know if that's going to matter as we move
Yeah.
forward.
There
But
seemed to be some intimacy there, as in like, I understand some holding of the hands, but what could she grasp and what did she get? We don't know.
yeah, so just to hit that, it might factor in. Clearly, one plot line as we move forward is going to be the continued plan for vengeance from Stephen. He's not done. So what's next? What does he try to get Robert to do? Because clearly his point in having dinner with Robert is to get Robert to do something.
Yeah, to empathize with him, to get him on his side. He says in the voiceover, I believe to put Robert at odds or on opposite sides from Catherine. So yeah, there's some plot still to be uncovered there.
Yeah, yeah. But, I mean, because he's already split them up, right?
Yeah,
Robert's already kicked her out of the house.
exactly.
So what is the further move? We're trying to, and does Nicholas still have that job selling vacuum cleaners? He told his dad he was going to go to work, and he was lying about that. But why was he lying about that? Why would you lie about that unless you lost your job?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know.
Well,
We'll
two
see.
more to go. Two more episodes. 6 and 7 are left, and we will get one in each of the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. So looking forward to see what happens. Hopefully we enjoy episode 6. Hopefully we enjoy episode 7. Hopefully we feel like this ends well. So I like to like things.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and again, I mean, if nothing else, the show is really well shot and well acted and
yeah,
all of that. So
very much
thanks,
so.
thanks as always for listening. We'll be back next week talking about episode 6 of Disclaimer. In the meantime, encourage you to check out tvobsessive.com. Lots of articles there that you can read about various TV shows, past and present. If you want to follow the site on social media, search for TV Obsessive, and you can find us on, major platforms and all of that. If you're on YouTube, please do hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate it. Elsewhere, leave a good rating, leave a good review, all of that kind of stuff is much appreciated. And we'll see you next week.
All right, see you next time.